A primary complaint among newer and less experienced players in Realm of the Mad God is that to gain high-level items they need to do high-level dungeons, and to be able to do high-level dungeons they need high-level items. While yes, it is possible for players to do exaltation level dungeons with very low level gear, this requires much stronger game sense and skill, which makes it harder for less experienced players to crack through. That's why in this list I will be detailing my choice for the 15 items that I feel are both easily farmable and have some relevance in endgame dungeons. Let me start with my criteria. First, these dungeons must obviously be easily accomplishable for newer players with low gear and moderate skill, so every exaltation dungeon, for example, is out. Second, these dungeons must be easy to farm on the majority of classes, either alone or in small groups. This means, for example, that I'm not including Tomb, due to it being a dungeon that is hellish to run for inexperienced players in small groups without a Knight or a Paralyze. Third, I'm only taking into account dungeons that are at least relatively common. This means something like the high-tech Terror is not being considered due to its scarcity. Fourth, for dungeons that are on the harder side, they must be run with some regularity. So dungeons like D-Docks and Woodland Labyrinth are considered, but dungeons like Shaitan's Lair and the Secluded Thicket are not. Fifth, these items must have some regular use in endgame dungeons. By regular, I mean you wouldn't be considered strange for having it as your primary weapon the vast majority of the time. This means something like EP, while strong, is not considered for this list. Sixth, no one-patch wonders. This means the Elder Heartwood Staff and the Wand of Hidden Knowledge, among others, are not considered for this list. Lastly, this video is being recorded on May 28th, 2025. This is right before a big patch, so items may change. Two items I'm looking at that I think will be much stronger next patch than this patch are the Kyuketsuki Hitogoroshi dropping from the Manor and the Enchantment Orb dropping from the Magic Woods. Alright, enough yapping. Let's get into the list. While the Wakizashi of Eastern Winds, dropping from the Woodland Labyrinth, is not a Wakizashi you should have as your main Waki due to its less than desirable damage output, it boasts the highest exposed duration as well as the highest exposed to mana ratio. The tier 6 Waki has the same mana cost, 80, for a lower duration, 3.5 seconds versus 4.5 seconds, and the tier 7 has a higher mana cost for only 4 seconds of expose. This means if you are a samurai who is min-maxing expose, which is a great buff for the vast majority of endgame dungeons, this should be in your wheelhouse. The Scepter of Fulmination, dropping from the Mad Lab, is a very strong swap-out scepter. Its slowing effect makes Sorcerer one of the most consistent slowing classes, which is extremely helpful for some dungeons, the most obvious example being the Fungal Cavern. This also makes it strong when rushing dungeons and clearing veteran biomes, as you do not have to fear getting accidentally shotgunned, as the slow gives you more time to react to enemies sitting on you. The Ceremonial Merllo, dropping from Janus the Door Warden in Oryx 1, is an extremely strong swap-out tome. This tome is able to give you 20 attack for 3 seconds on use. This makes it great as a DPS swap-out tome, as you maintain this buff after switching to another tome. It's worth noting, due to how buffs are calculated in Realm, each subsequent use of the ability halves the added effect. For example, 1 use gives you the full 20 attack, 2 uses gives you 30 attack, 3 uses gives you 35 attack, and so forth. Some tier 0 abilities are extremely strong, arguably none more so than the Trickster's Prism and the Priest's Tome. The tier 0 Prism allows you to teleport all over the place for an extremely low mana cost, which makes it ideal for quick movement and rushing dungeons. The tier 0 Tome, showcased by Jurmee, aka Chili, a much better player than me, is a great tome for dungeons such as Moonlight Village. Due to its high Wizmod ratio and low mana cost, its heal per mana is the highest of any tier tome, especially when you min-max for it with items such as a Ritual Robe. Its ability to heal is unmatched by the vast majority of tomes in the game. The Doku, dropping from the Treasure Eggs, the Boss Eggs, and the Boss in the Crawling Depths, has been a consistent force in the meta. This was formerly the single best katana in the game from the release of the Crawling Depths up until 2017. However, more recently, it has regained a spot in the meta again due to its Awakened enchantment, making it nearly rival the tier 14 Kusanagi in DPS. Also worth noting is its comparable DPS to tier 13 Sadamune, which is obtainable through much harder dungeons than the Crawling Depths. This DPS is comparable even without the Awakened enchantment, meaning it is a great katana for newer players. There's not much more I can say about the Snake Eye Ring that hasn't been said. Most classes in this game were not designed to have on-demand speedy with no drawbacks. This item gives any class speedy on ability use, making it great for anything from farming potions in Godland dungeons to catching up to the group in a nest to rushing for pots in the Lost Halls. The Water Dragon's Silk Robe, dropping from Nikau in the Lair of Draconis, is not a jack of all trades. Compared to the Tier 14 Robe of the Ancient Intellect, you are losing 4 defense, 75 mana, and 8 wisdom for 6 speed and 5 vitality. This sounds like an awful trade-off, and it is for a lot of classes. However, specifically Bard, Wizard, and Summoner may prefer to opt for this over the Tier 14 Robe. This is due to their lack of Wismod, which renders the wisdom offered by the Tier 14 Robe less useful than the speed and vitality offered by the Water Dragon's Silk Robe. Like the Scepter of Fulmination, the Conducting Wand drops in the Mad Lab. However, it instead drops from the second boss, the Horrific Creation. This wand is crazy overtuned. This wand deals more damage than the Tier 14 wand up until about 40 defense, as well as having one of the greatest Awakened enchantments, boosting its damage by a lot. This wand is especially good on Sorcerer due to the lack of piercing not being a great loss for the already strong AoE class, as well as the high wisdom from Ritual Robe and a Tier 7 Scepter, buffing the Awakened enchantment's Wismod. The Recurring Terror spell is an incredibly versatile and strong spell, which is considered to be one of the best spells in the game, and the best in certain dungeons. Dropping from the Parasite Chambers, it is generally considered to be one of the most consistent spells due to its Bulwark-esque shots circling around until they hit something. This makes it great for dungeons where using a tablet or a Tier 7 spell may be too inconsistent, for example in some Orcs 3 phases. It is also great against high defense targets due to its relatively low shot count, outdamaging a full Tier 6 spell bomb at 38 defense, a reference enemy being the Crystal Worm Mother in the Fungal Cavern, which has 40 defense. The Cutless, dropping from the Deadwater Docks, is a very high DPS sword, especially with its Awakened enchantment. Without the Awakened enchantment, it can outdamage a Tier 13 sword up until about 20 defense, which makes it great against armor-broken targets. It works amazingly in chase phases as well, as the 0.2 range you're losing will not matter a great deal. With the Awakened enchantment, it is a very good candidate for a great endgame sword, especially if you are used to playing with the range decrease, as this was the best sword for a long while. The Murky toxin, dropping from the Toxic Sewers, is commonly considered to be one of the best poisons in the game. On an 8/8 assassin, it will outdamage the Tier 7 poison consistently. This gets even higher when you start placing DPS items, such as the Tane on the class due to the Murky toxin scaling with attack and dex instead of the traditional wisdom scaling. This makes it arguably the best poison if you're min-maxing DPS, as you gain the benefits of attack and dexterity on hit, as well as increasing the damage of your poison. The Leaf Bow has been a consistent mainstay in the meta since it was added in 2013. Dropping from the Woodland Labyrinth, it is still considered one of the best bows in the game. This is due to its high range and relatively high DPS, especially with the available Awakened enchantment. It is an acceptable alternative to the Void Bow, the Clockwork Repeater, and other late endgame bows, despite being relatively accessible compared to these due to dropping from the Woodland Labyrinth instead of something like the Lost Halls or the Cogbold Steamworks. The Wand of the Fallen is one of the best wands in the game, and has been for quite a while. This wand completely beats out the Tier 14 wand, as well as the Conducting Wand, and is oft still used in endgame content as a swap-out wand to the Luminaire and the Laser Pointer due to its lower shot speed, making it better for chase phases and the like. The DPS and consistency on this wand is crazy, and it's no wonder to see why it still gets so much consistent use among top-level players, even 8 years after the release of the Mountain Temple. Mercy's Bane, dropping from Oryx 2, is generally considered the single strongest heavy armor in the game. It is sometimes exchanged for the Gladiator Guard at high levels, however the Mercy's Bane is strictly stronger than the Gladiator Guard despite dropping from one whole Oryx lower. This item provides 14 additional offensive stats in exchange for 18 defense from the Tier 14 Annihilation armor, a trade-off the vast majority of endgame players are more than willing to make, especially on higher defense classes such as Knight and Warrior. My number one pick for the best easily accessible item is the Scepter of Devastation. This is the most commonly used scepter among sorcerers in high-level exaltation dungeons, as its single target damage is entirely unmatched, especially when you make use of its extremely high attack mod with items such as the Vesture of Duality and the Diplomatic Rope, both dropping from O3 mini-bosses. This means for dungeons where you only have to hit one boss, including stuff like the Shatters, Oryx 3, Moonlight Village, and the vast majority of exaltation dungeons for that matter, you'll be using this for most of the bosses, boss phases and simply swapping to another scepter for minion clear. Dropping from the parasite chambers, for the strengths of this item, it is much too accessible. This is why I've ranked it as the single best accessible endgame item. Let me conclude by saying, I understand my list is not perfect. There are definitely items I skipped over. This list just serves to help new players understand some of the greatest easily accessible items to help bridge the gap between Godlands dungeons and Exaltation dungeons. Thank you all for watching, and please comment your thoughts. I'd love to know what I can improve or what videos you guys would like to see in the future.